They say home is where the heart is, but my heart is a frantic drum against my ribs now. This old house, once a sanctuary of quiet, has become a cage of fear, its walls pressing in on me. Every shadow now holds a secret, every creak a threat, because this isn't my home anymore. Not since the door started locking itself and the other sounds began. I had moved into Aunt Clara's remote, inherited house only a month ago, seeking nothing but peace and solitude for my writing. The isolation was perfect, a balm to my weary soul after years of city noise and constant demands. Just me and the gentle rustle of leaves outside my window. I cherished those quiet mornings, sipping my steaming tea on the broad, sun-drenched porch, my mind finally clear and ready to weave stories. The old house itself often creaked and groaned, settling into its age, a familiar and comforting sound that simply spoke of history and resilience. Sometimes I would wander into a room and find a light burning brightly, a light I swore I had turned off before leaving. I'd always dismiss it as my own forgetfulness, a byproduct of deep concentration on my novels. Or I would misplace my favorite ceramic mug, only to discover it later in some odd spot, like balanced precariously on a bookshelf, and I'd just shrug it off with a soft laugh, blaming my scattered writer's brain. Once, late at night, I thought I heard a faint, persistent scratching sound emanating from the attic directly above my bedroom. The wind was particularly high that evening, howling around the eaves and rattling the window panes, so I attributed the noise to that. I even smiled to myself, thinking how utterly silly it was to feel a sudden shiver snake its way down my spine in my own, perfectly safe home. Then, one crisp afternoon, as I returned from a short walk, I noticed the front door, which I always left ajar to invite the gentle breeze inside, was firmly shut. I distinctly remembered propping it open with a heavy, moss-covered stone just an hour before settling down on the porch swing with a new manuscript. My rational mind immediately argued it was just the wind, a strong gust I hadn't noticed while engrossed in the captivating story. Yet, as I approached, the heavy stone still lay untouched on the porch, precisely where I'd left it, well away from the door's path. The air suddenly felt colder. A few days later, my current writing notebook, the one filled with fresh ideas and half-formed plots, lay open on my desk, a particular sentence unfinished, the ink still glistening slightly on the page. I stepped away for a moment, just to make a quick cup of coffee, and when I returned, it was closed. Not just closed, but neatly stacked with other completed notebooks, a meticulous order I would never impose on a work in progress. A subtle chill prickled my skin. A strange, faint metallic tang seemed to linger in the air sometimes, barely perceptible at first, but unsettling enough to make me pause. I couldn't quite place it, a coppery, almost industrial scent, out of place in such an old wooden house. I found myself instinctively double-checking all the locks on doors and windows, a new, cautious habit I'd never had before, born of a vague, unarticulated unease. One evening, as I was reading by the fireplace, I heard a definite thud from downstairs, a heavy, resonant sound like something large falling or being dragged across the floor. My heart jumped violently, a sudden, panicked lurch against my ribs, but I quickly convinced myself it was just the old pipes groaning, or perhaps a large branch hitting the roof in the rising wind outside. My logic felt thin, however, stretched taut. When I investigated, cautiously creeping down the stairs, nothing was out of place in the living room or dining area, yet the air in the living room felt distinctly colder, even heavy, as if permeated by some unseen presence. I found myself listening intently to the house's every murmur, every sigh of settling wood, a new, anxious vigilance replacing my former peaceful complacency. I started to notice an unfamiliar stiffness in my joints in the mornings, a deep, persistent ache that settled in my knees and knuckles, though I hadn't overexerted myself in any way. My sleep, once deep and restorative, became restless, haunted by fragmented, disturbing dreams that left me with a lingering sense of dread upon waking. The lines between sleep and waking seemed to blur. Then I began waking up to soft, muffled scuttling sounds that seemed to come from inside the walls themselves, always in the dead of night. I checked diligently for mice, setting traps with cheese and peanut butter, but they remained untouched day after day, the sounds continuing to plague my nights with their furtive, unsettling rhythm. They weren't animal sounds, not really. They were something else. One morning, a small, dark smudge, almost like a smear of dried mud, appeared on the pristine white wall directly near my bed. I tried to wipe it away with a damp cloth, scrubbing hard, but it was dry and seemed almost embedded in the paint, defying all removal attempts. It was a stark, ugly mark on my formerly clean wall, a physical manifestation of the growing disquiet. Later that week, as I walked down the hall, I caught my reflection in the antique hallway mirror, and it seemed momentarily off, distorted, for just a fleeting second. My features seemed to stretch, my eyes to deepen. Then it was normal again. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, but a cold, hard knot formed in my stomach, a premonition of something deeply wrong. I discovered a deep, jagged scratch on the polished oak floorboards in the dining room, a fresh, raw mark that cut across the grain like a wound. I had no furniture that could have caused such damage, no sharp objects I had dragged, and I hadn't moved anything heavy in days. It was an impossible mark, left by an unseen hand or claw. That night, a distinct whisper, a low, sibilant sound, drifted from the dark hall just outside my bedroom door. It was my name, spoken clearly, Clara. I froze, my breath catching in my throat, a sudden, cold panic seizing me, because my name isn't Clara, my name is Alara. The whispering faded, replaced by an unnerving silence, heavy and expectant, not the peaceful quiet I craved, but a waiting, watchful quiet. I felt a growing, intense sense of being watched, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, even when I was completely alone in the house. The air felt thick, charged with an unseen presence. I found myself pacing the house constantly, my eyes darting nervously to every shadow, every corner, checking behind curtains, under beds. Every shadow seemed to deepen, every sound to amplify, turning my once beloved sanctuary into a labyrinth of dread and paranoia. Sleep became impossible, a luxury I could no longer afford. My appetite waned, replaced by a strange, almost primal hunger for something I couldn't identify, a deep, unsettling gnawing in my stomach that no amount of food could satisfy. I tried to write, to escape into my stories, but the words felt alien on the page, the narratives turning dark and unsettling, mirroring my own escalating fear. I started noticing subtle changes in my own body, an increased sensitivity to light and sound, making the slightest flicker or whisper feel jarring. My skin felt strangely taut, almost stretched, and my senses became unnaturally sharp, almost painful, picking up details I never would have before. It was as if my body was preparing for something. The metallic tang in the air grew stronger now, a constant, unpleasant presence, and sometimes I'd catch a whiff of something else, something musky and distinctly feral. It was a smell that made my stomach churn with revulsion, a bitter, lingering taste that clung to my tongue even after brushing my teeth. It was the scent of something wild, something predatory. One evening, as dusk settled over the house, painting the living room in long, eerie shadows, I saw a fleeting, hunched shadow dart past the living room window. Not outside, but from the inside, moving with surprising speed. I gasped, rushing to the window, my heart pounding, but saw nothing but my own terrified reflection staring back from the deepening twilight. My name is Alara, and that voice had called me Clara, a name I hadn't heard spoken aloud since Aunt Clara's passing. I huddled under my covers that night, adrenaline coursing through my veins, desperately trying to convince myself it was all a dream, a figment of my overactive imagination, a cruel trick of the isolated house. But the silence that followed the shadow and the whispers was not peaceful. It was heavy, expectant, menacing, like the held breath of a predator. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting, its ancient timbers groaning with unspoken secrets pressing in on me from all sides. I was no longer alone. The next morning, I found the kitchen window, which I had securely latched the night before, wide open. A cold, aggressive gust blew through the room, scattering papers from the table, a definite, undeniable breach that shattered any lingering doubts. This was real. I slammed it shut with a desperate cry, my hands trembling violently, my fingers fumbling with the latch, and then triple-checked every other window and door in a frantic frenzy. As I gripped the latches, I noticed my fingernails felt strangely stronger, thicker, almost like nascent claws, and a strange new ache pulsed deeply in my fingertips. I dismissed it as nerves, tension. That evening, as I tried to force myself to eat a bite of toast, I heard distinct, heavy footsteps directly upstairs. They moved slowly, rhythmically, from the study, across the landing, directly towards my bedroom door. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate for escape. I grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace, its cold metal a small comfort in my trembling hands, my breath catching in my throat. The footsteps paused just outside my door, a silence stretched taut. Then a low, guttural growl vibrated through the wood, a primal sound that was undeniably not human. I pressed myself against the wall, the poker raised defensively, my body screaming to run, to flee, but feeling utterly trapped within my own room. Doorknob slowly turned, a metallic click echoing loudly in the suffocating silence. Then it started to creak open, revealing only impenetrable darkness beyond. I lunged forward with a desperate, guttural cry, slamming the door shut with all my might and shoving a heavy antique chair under the handle, my muscles screaming with effort. From the other side, I heard a frustrated snarl, an inhuman sound of pure rage that chilled me to the bone. Echoing the growl I had just heard, I spent the rest of the night awake, huddled in a corner, clutching the poker, listening to the relentless scratching. The scratches were no longer coming from the attic or the walls. They were coming from the inside of my closet door now, frantic and desperate, tearing at the wood. The acrid, musky scent grew overwhelming, filling the room, making my eyes water and my stomach churn with nausea. I imagined something monstrous, something unspeakable, trapped inside that closet, trying to claw its way out, trying to get to me, to consume me. In the pre-dawn light, I saw the closet door was horribly marred with deep, fresh gouges, like something had tried to claw its way out with incredible force. My own hands felt raw, my nails broken and bleeding, or so I thought, from gripping the heavy poker so tightly in my terrified grip all night. I had to leave, I decided, had to escape this nightmare, to find help, to prove I wasn't losing my mind. I crept downstairs, planning my escape route, my eyes darting to every single shadow, every potential threat, every creaking board. Freedom was just beyond that front door. I reached the front door, my fingers fumbling with the deadbolt, numb with terror and haste, desperate to throw it open and run into the morning light. But the deadbolt was already thrown, locked from the inside, preventing my escape, sealing me in with whatever horror stalked this house. I heard a low, raspy chuckle from directly behind me, a sound that resonated deep in my chest, a vibration against my very bones. I whirled around, the poker raised defensively, my eyes wide with terror, but saw nothing, just the empty hallway stretching out behind me. Then I noticed a faint, dark reflection in the polished wood of the antique grandfather clock nearby, a glimmer of movement. It was a hunched, monstrous shape, barely visible, standing directly behind me, an impossible, terrifying silhouette in the dim light. But it wasn't facing the clock to be reflected. It was facing me, its head tilted in a disturbingly familiar way, like a twisted mirror image. I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my shoulder, like a sudden clenching, and heard a choked gasp escape the stillness of the room. Chuckle came again, closer now, emanating from somewhere deep within the room, and terrifyingly, from somewhere deep within me. I dropped the poker with a clatter, my hands flying to my mouth, a choked cry escaping my lips, a sound of profound horror. I heard the gasp again, a wet, ragged sound, and realized with dawning, stomach-lurching horror that it was undeniably coming from my own throat, a sound I had made. My eyes were drawn back to the clock's reflection, now clearer, sharper, revealing every gruesome detail. I stared at the faint reflection, not seeing a monster standing behind me, but seeing myself, horribly transformed. My reflection in the dark, polished wood was hunched, distorted, my eyes glowing with an unnatural, predatory light that was not my own. My skin looked mottled and gray, stretched thin over sharp angles, my fingers elongated and tipped with the broken, dark claws I had thought were from gripping the poker. The metallic taste in my mouth, the stiffness, the aches, the scratching, the growls, the whispered Clara, all of it clicked into place with horrifying, sickening clarity. Aunt Clara had spoken of a family affliction, a slow, insidious transformation, something she called the slow creep, a darkness that festered in the bloodline, waiting for its moment. She had warned me, pleaded with me to never come to this isolated house, to never unleash what was within. She had called me Alara then, but when she spoke of the affliction, she had always whispered Clara, her own name, with a fearful glint in her eyes. The scratching on the closet door had been my own frantic attempts to get out. From a night I couldn't remember. From a body I no longer fully controlled. The locked door, the moved objects, the whispers, the growls, the musky scent, the hunger, the shadows, every terrifying incident had been me, slowly but surely succumbing to the creeping darkness. I looked down at my hands, truly seeing them for the first time, seeing the dark, sharp claws fully emerged from my fingertips, not broken from a poker, but sharp and new. And I heard the chuckle again, a deep, raspy sound. But this time, I knew with absolute certainty it was my own, echoing from deep within my chest. My human mind, the Alara I knew, was finally slipping away, replaced by something ancient and hungry, something monstrous, something that had waited patiently for generations. The house wasn't haunted by an external monster. It was becoming my cage, the place of my final metamorphosis, trapping the beast I was becoming. The last vestiges of Alara watched in horror as the reflection in the grandfather clock smiled, a wide, predatory grin that was undeniably mine, stretching my face into a grotesque mask. The door wasn't locking me in to protect me from a threat or to protect anyone else from me. It was locking it in, the monster that was now me. And it was time for it to finally come out and claim its new, horrifying existence.